Hello, welcome, and moin moin. My name is Niklas Czesch. I'm the developer evangelist of Shopware, and today I am talking to Jisse Reitsma about a training series he just created. Jisse is a household name in the Magento community and founder of Yireo, I hope I pronounced this correctly, a company offering developer trainings for Magento, React, Vue.js, and now Shopware. Okay, so Jisse, hi. I'm glad that you joined us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this shopper community, and I'm happy to be in this interview as well.
Yeah. Also, great. I think we will hear a little bit about you later on, but before we talk about the content of the training, so as I already said, you are a household name in the Magento community, so it may be a little bit confusing for people in the Shopware community or in general why you are creating trainings for a competing Shopware e-commerce platform. Sorry, Shopware and e-commerce somehow is the same for me. So could you maybe say a few words on why you decided to create these trainings and how it, if at all, affects your involvement with Magento?
Yeah, well, I think it's a tough question, right? So I've been part of the Magento community for quite some time. I think it's over 12 years ago that I joined that community from the early start of Magento. Before that, I actually was part of another community of Joomla. So I know actually how it is like to hop communities. And I think like the reason for me to do so would be much more technology driven. So I'm a developer myself. I love technology, and simply if the technology just evolves into a certain direction, I'm just keen to get on board. And yeah, it just happened to be that a lot of people are currently interested in Shopware, while they used to be very interested or involved also with the Magento community. So that's kind of like my story. I don't see it as competition. I don't see it as me betraying the Magento community or something. I just see it as kind of a logical follow-up for myself.
So you are not Magento Jisse, you are Jisse.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, but we come to additions to your name later on, I think.
Okay.
Okay, then maybe let's talk about you as a person. So what is your background in development?
Yeah, so I actually got started with PHP development when PHP was at version 2, and I didn't really understand PHP 2. PHP 3 actually introduced templating, and that's where I got on board. And I think somewhere along the way, when on its own PHP applications became more popular, I got on board with PHP BB. I'm not sure if you know about that, but
sure.
And then somewhere along the line, Joomla came up, and Magento 1 came up, Magento 2 came up, and for me, therefore, Shopware is also kind of like a logical conclusion.
Do you remember what you wrote as a first program in PHP?
So I do know that I signed myself up for the job of creating a website, knowing a little bit about HTML, and then somebody needed to explain CSS to me. But we're talking about 1998 or something, so a very long time ago. But I still remember also that I didn't know about design in the first place. So and that site was actually built in PHP 2. So basically I needed to build output using PHP 2, and I didn't have an understanding of what programming was in the first place. So
yeah, same for me. My first program I think was a counter for the website.
Exactly, yeah.
Something like that.
It all starts with the hello world, right? So
yeah. That's true. Okay, so and now you are doing Shopware trainings. What is the target audience for these trainings?
Yeah, so first of all, the invite from Shopware was actually to work together to explain to Magento developers how they could get started with Shopware on its own. But I think along the line that ideal, that goal got a little bit fuzzy because currently there's a lot of videos that I've created that don't add the word Magento anywhere. So it's a pure Shopware video. And therefore, it could also be simply that you have a background of Shopware 5 or no experience with Shopware at all. And then still those videos would be interesting. However, I'm a technical guy personally, so once I get enthusiastic about a system, I always try to get a little bit more in depth So there's a couple of videos that really are like a smooth introduction to what you could do with Shopware. But I think there's also kind of like a lot of more in-depth material that requires you to also have a fundamental understanding of things like Symphony, dependency injection, and etc. So it's kind of like a large group that could be interested with all of these videos.
So you started doing this Shopware for Magento devs, and then it got a little bit out of hand, and you got excited.
Exactly, yeah. Well, and maybe that kind of like shows also the reason how I got on board with Shopware at the beginning was also like if you're a Magento developer, there's a certain kind of expectation of what you expect from that platform. So I've been hearing that Shopware was kind of like the more simple version of Magento, and well, Magento is known to over-engineer things, so actually it doesn't really sound like a bad thing.
Less complex, maybe.
Maybe less complex, focused more on the core architecture than actually just everything that could belong to e-commerce. And that makes maybe getting on board with Shopware a lot more straightforward. However, I also wanted to know like how deep the rabbit hole actually went. So I just got started with a lot of in-depth things, and I'm still just happy to have made that decision, because it simply proves to me that actually the complexity could still be there as well with Shopware. So that's
And you already created over 24 hours of video content, and that might sound a bit overwhelming. But what are the main topics? Because you're not just doing videos for the sake of doing videos. You actually have a plan.
So my plan, first of all, was get into Shopware. Also, but maybe part of that video series was for myself a certain learning curve. However, the plan was still to basically guide Magento developers slowly into that system. But that's a little bit more than that Hello World example that we talked about. It's also getting into like knowing the flexibility of the system. So it's going all the way from simple templating and just to get the hang of that, all the way also to like adding your own custom entity and then with translations on top of it, which could be seen as a kind of more challenging task. But I really think that my 24-hour videos are only the surface of basically what to expect later on with Shopware. That's for me both the challenge, because I needed to stop somewhere and just say like, okay, this is it, because otherwise I could have gone endlessly with it.
So could I say that you, as someone who has no prior experience with Shopware, you did these trainings with a fresh look and from the perspective of someone who is not yet familiar with Shopware, and you gained all that knowledge, and now you are teaching other people coming from the same background, not Magento background, but not knowing much about Shopware 6, how to develop with it.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when watching educational content like this, right, users usually don't watch it for their entertainment, but with a certain purpose or a certain question behind that. And which needs are you trying to fulfill with your videos here?
So I think first of all, it's making sure that the foundation is correct. However, I also wanted to make sure that a couple of the more complex configurations in Shopware are also introduced. And that's always kind of like the difficulty if you focus upon the more advanced stuff and the basic stuff at the same moment. Either you have plenty of time to do so, or actually you don't. So currently I would say that in the future I'm still hoping to work upon more of that foundational work as well.
What
so
do you
for
mean,
instance,
if I may interrupt you, what do you mean with foundational work?
Yes, so for instance, Shopware 6 is based upon Symphony, and it's based upon Twig, and part of Vue is also in there, which really requires you to actually know more about Symphony or Twig to get started with it. However, just knowing about Symphony or Twig in general is also not good enough, because there's always kind of like the Shopware way of doing things as well. So that's what I call the basics and the foundations. So there's a certain fundament that you need to get started with. And for instance, those fundaments with Symphony are called maybe fundaments, but they're not simple. So I'm talking about surface injection, surface compilation, setter injection, compiler passes, and I know that actually by talking with other Symphony developers, those are already kind of like challenging topics. So not really for Symphony newbie, but still because Shopware is based upon it, to kind of like experience the full power of Shopware. I'm always sounding like a Jedi or something. Then actually you also need to gather those basics as well. So Symphony is there. And I think in a similar way, Vue is also there. And maybe I have to admit also that Vue was at first also kind of like the link for me to dive into the story of Shopware. Because Vue Storefront is a platform that first of all made itself compatible with Magento, and then actually from Magento they also started to adopt other platforms, commerce tools, and Shopware, and that's how Shopware PWA became part of my agenda, and then I made that whole swerve back to the backend development part again as well. So. But yeah, so Vue and JavaScript are again also things that you really need to conquer before you dive into Shopper 6 itself. So that's what I consider basics, but it's not really basic to maybe the average developer.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Now, two situations. If I'm already familiar with Symphony, I think I can just omit some parts of your training.
Well, it's always depending on how much you know about Symphony. Sure. One of the difficulties, what I found is, for instance, in Magento, there's also parts of Symphony in there. Mm-hmm. And that's actually also where I started my whole learning curve, how to create your own CLI command within the console, which is based upon Symphony. And then at first you think like, oh, but I know Symphony, the console, because it's also there in Magento 2. But actually the reality is that, well, it's not only about creating a silly command line, but you actually want that command line to do something. Yeah. And doing that something actually relies upon the Shopware framework again as well. So even like some of the basics are not that it's purely Symphony that you need to know about, but kind of like the Shopware flavor of Symphony. That's also kind of like my approach in those videos, right? So in those videos, I'm not teaching a Symphony developer how to get started with Symphony. Yeah. It's really focused upon Shopware.
What about the other end of the spectrum? You talked about surface injection, I think.
Yeah.
Do I need to know this to write a Shopware plugin?
So I think that's still something under debate. So I think as a community, Shopware also needs to find out what the differences are between Shopware 6 and Shopware 5. There's a new way of dealing with things. And overall, I think that the architecture of Shopware 6, not the architecture of Shopware 5, got me into Shopware 6. So it's more professional, more architecture minded. I don't know, like, but there's a certain different way of dealing with things, and theoretically you don't need to dive into that technical stuff to dive into Shopware or to kickstart your own project. However, if you really want to build something more complex and you're a backend developer, then definitely you need to get into that surface injection part as well.
So things like this would not be necessary to start writing plugins, but it can make the difference between a successful and a less successful plugin, or could make your life a lot easier as soon as you get into complex territory with your plugin.
Yeah, and definitely. And I my personal experience from my path into technology in general is also that if you you don't know about the in-depth technology itself, then you're also not going to look for it right away. And then if you're working upon a simple solution and then suddenly that simple solution gets a little bit out of hand, then you still don't know about what else the framework actually has to offer. And then you're missing out on the possibilities of Shopware. So I personally always recommend you to just get as much knowledge on board before getting started with coding. Even if you're not getting like half of the story, then at least it's somewhere in the back of your mind. So somewhere you know about that thing that exists out there, but you don't fully understand it yet. So that you know also your learning path to get there in the end.
So your training basically leads you from knowing next to nothing about Shopware, maybe a bit about Symphony, to being having a kickstart for your plugin, leading into actually building serious stuff with all the possibilities available, or most of the possibilities available.
Yeah.
And you think that's still the surface only, which is great.
Yeah, well, so it's always the definition of what is a surface and what are basics. But so sometimes I personally believe that if you want to grow within knowledge or anything that you see, you need to set the bar a little bit higher than you actually normally would aim it. So that allows for a faster growth. And I do believe that actually some of the tutorials I've created are mind-blowing for front-enders, for instance. So that's also kind of like the fact that the videos are not focused purely upon back-end development. It's also about front-end development. It's also about PWA. So there's in there something for everyone. But obviously it doesn't mean that you're if you're new to the whole thing, that every video actually applies to you. That's kind of like a logical thing. Yeah.
So the question that led us to this point was who should watch this? What are you trying to cover? And the answer that I just got was basically everyone who either is new to Shopware and wants to just start a project, or someone who maybe already knows about Shopware and wants to get more in-depth knowledge to really create the good stuff. Could I say
yeah,
it that
definitely.
way?
Yeah, because I've talked also to a couple of Shopper 6 developers that are already underway with their own Shopper 6 projects. And simply by just kind of like interviewing them, I also got the hang of like what kind of concepts were also still unknown to them. And that was kind of like for me the opportunity again to see how deep I could go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so therefore it's all over the place. But by going all over the place, a lot of different topics are also not covered in depth because that's what you can do unless you have an unlimited amount of time. So yeah, it's difficult to describe it, but definitely it would be interesting for I think a lot of people.
And in the end, it's not one big video lasting for 24 hours, but it's multiple ones with description, with titles, so everyone can pick their topic.
Yeah. However, the further I got into the end, the longer the videos also get. a little bit of
if it's more complex, you need more time to explain. I think that's only natural.
Exactly.
Now, a big topic with video content in general is keeping it up to date. So is this a one-timer, or will you actually update the videos in the future?
So I'm happy to actually update them. I'm already working upon more videos as well, and we need to find out like how that finds the way to all of the viewers. But in general, I'm also eager to jump on board with the Shopware train, not just to do this promotional thing one time, but actually to stay. So I'm here to stay, and I'm here to actually keep growing also with the whole community on Shopper 6.
That's great to hear. And Yireo, your company. Do I pronounce this correctly?
I don't know.
Okay, perfect. So your company, Yireo, is actually a training company. So you know what you're doing, and you're doing it very good.
Yeah, so I've been actually training people already, so like since that beginning of Magento 1, and currently already doing some trainings on Shopper 6 also, and the videos are kind of like part of that whole episode as well. Yeah.
So you're a seasoned trainer. Great. Now I have some personal questions since we are coming a little bit to the end of the interview. And we already talked about having additions to names, and I was told that you were called Knockout Jisse. So should I maybe do some MMA training before
Well,
meeting you?
so some things of the Magento community are there to stay, and some things could just happily just be scratched out. So I think Knockout Jisse is actually one of them. The name is actually twofold. First of all, Magento is using by default in its default front end and back end a Knockout library, which is a JavaScript library to do stuff in. So that actually led into Knockout Jisse because I was also one of the first to train people in that. However, the real meaning actually is a little bit more, something I'm not really proud of. There was this Magento conference. I was really tired before I actually went to that. I started drinking gin, and then actually I started to drink more gin, and again a little bit more gin, and then the outcome was actually that I missed out on the entire conference because I was knockout.
So a cautionary tale at that point. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
And another question. In the training videos, I already saw some of them. You're wearing a t-shirt that says Magento Bastards instead of Magento Master, which is some kind of, Magento thing. What?
So I'm actually wearing that same shirt right now. I'm not sure if you can see it, but well, it's a little bit too low now. But anyway, so it's basically referring to the fact that I'm a Magento Master, which was an award that Magento handed out to important people in the community for things they've done. Well, and I've been training people, I've been helping out people, I've been running also developer conferences. And because of that, actually, I became 3 times a Magento Master. Everything great. But then every time when you're getting a Magento Master, then everyone else is wondering like, hey, but what about that other person? Why is he not or she not becoming a Magento Master?
Because there is no clear path to becoming a master.
No, so it's opinionated maybe. It's about who you know in the community. It's not a really like that only friends are being favored, but it's a natural thing that within a community, not everyone knows everyone. So sure. That's leading into kind of like a selection. Mm-hmm. So I basically came up like, well, if you want to become something, you don't need to become a Magento Master, but you could also be a Magento Bastard. And I'm actually number 1. And you could just become a Magento Bastard. Nobody needs to elect you. The only thing that you need to do is just wear the shirt and shout out like I'm a Magento Bastard. So
how many are there?
Just one. So that's me.
Okay, maybe not your most successful project, but a very funny one.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Then I think everyone got an overview of what you're doing with Shopware trainings, and I hope that you, my beloved audience, are all watching the videos, because Jisse is very fun to watch, as you should know by now. And Jisse, thank you for being here. Thank you for the interview, and especially thank you for doing these trainings. It's really awesome.
Yeah, and thank you as well for this entire opportunity. Let's join together and make Shopware 6 even more big.
We will.
Awesome.
See you.